Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, from whichever part of the world that you're joining in. Thank you so much for being with us here today. We have an amazing session lined up for you today by George Washington University School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, also known as GWCs. I can see quite a few of you in the audience who have started trickling in, 60 plus of you. Once again, welcome and thank you once again for joining us. If everyone in the audience can quickly let me know in the chat window, which city are you dialing in from? We want to know where you're coming in from. If you're from India, which city in India? If you're from Africa, any other part of the world, just let us know where you're coming in from. So we have Rishabh from Bombay. Hi, Rishabh. Abhishek from Patna. Ashok from Kathmandu. Shah from Srinagar. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. We have Gideon from Ghana, people from Pune, from Mumbai, Nigeria. So anyone else who's from any other country, I can see quite a few of you. This Grace from Kumasi, thank you so much. So in the chat window, very quickly, if you could let us know from which city you're dialing in from. We're close to 100 participants in the room now. And like I mentioned, a very, very exciting session coming up for you today from GWC's, the George Washington School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. So the topic for today's masterclass is a very interesting one. It talks about using simulation modeling to expand processing capacity. It's going to be a case study on doubling COVID-19 testing at a US laboratory. So once again, to everyone who's new and coming in, welcome to the session. In this exciting masterclass, we are going to be talking about simulation modeling. We are going to be talking about fascinating new technologies. We are going to be talking about how this affects decision making. And for most of you in the room, we've all experienced the challenges which were brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, especially the struggle where in certain cities, in certain parts of the world, there was not enough COVID-19 tests available. So in this masterclass today, with GWCs, we will be talking about how we learn how a basic problem faced by managers transformed into a super useful technical solution, completely changing how a laboratory worked during the pandemic. Before I go any further, I am going to quickly take this opportunity to introduce the panel to you today. My name is Sabahat Farzuk. I represent Seed Global Education. We are a UK headquartered company which facilitates interactions between top global universities like the one here with us today and prospective students like yourself, giving you a taste of what these programs are offering, what are these institutes about, helping you to connect with the faculty, to help you make informed choices about your higher studies. On the panel with me today is Dr. Grala, the Associate Professor for Engineering, Management and Systems Engineering at GWCs. Thank you so much, Dr. Grala, for joining us today. Along with her, we also have Erin, who is the Senior Associate Director for Graduate Recruitment and Admission, who will also be talking to us about the programs and offering at GWCs. I see close to 180 of you in the room today. Once again, to everyone, thank you so much for joining us. But before we dive into this exciting masterclass, I have a quick poll question for you today, which is going to be on your screens shortly. So I'm going to launch our first poll question for this evening. If all 180 of you can have a look at the screen in front of you, the question is, what do you think simulation modeling is primarily used for? Is it used for predicting future events? Is it used for creating virtual environments? Is it for understanding complex systems, or is it for playing video games? So to everyone in the audience, the first poll for the day is on the screen in front of you. I'm going to keep it running for a couple of more seconds. What do you think simulation modeling is primarily used for? Is it something that is used for predicting future events? Is it useful for creating virtual environments? Is it something which is used to understand, for the understanding of complex systems, or is it used for playing video games? I see 72, 75 of you have already answered. I'm going to keep the poll on for a little bit more, encouraging all 200 of you who are in the room currently to please go and cast your votes so that we could end the poll question, which is on your screen for you shortly. And I can hand over to Dr. Grala to start with her presentation. So very quickly, if you could go and cast your votes for the poll question on your screen in front of you. And with that, I'm going to wait a couple of more seconds for you to join in. Please stay around. We are going to be starting very, very shortly. I'm now going to end the poll for today and share the results with you, which are on the screen in front of you. 40% of you said that simulation modeling is used for understanding complex systems. 30% of you said it is for predicting future events. 29% of you said it is for creating virtual environments. And about 2% of you said it is for playing video games. So thank you so much for participating in the poll for today. I now request Dr. Grala to please come on screen, let us know what is the right answer to this question, and of course, get started with her presentation. So Dr. Grala, if you can let us know how many of them have selected the right answer in this poll.
So my favorite answer in this poll is for understanding complex systems, because we use simulation modeling for many different purposes, but almost all of them have to do with understanding complex systems. But the other two choices, predicting future events and creating virtual environments, are also pretty good, because we are creating a virtual environment in which we are experimenting, and you'll see how we did that in my talk today. And we are using it to predict future events, more like predict what a system will do in the future or how it will behave. So those are all pretty good answers. I would love it if it was also for playing video games. That would make my job very fun, but we don't use it for that quite as much.
Great, thank you so much, Grala. With that, I will now stop sharing the results and hand over to Dr. Grala to please take us to her presentation for today. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm really excited to meet all of you today, and I'm very excited to share some of my research with you. So today I'm speaking to you about a project that we did a few years ago during the height of the COVID pandemic, about using simulation modeling to understand a complex system. In this case, to figure out how we could expand processing capacity for COVID-19 testing at a US laboratory. And I wanted to highlight that one of the exciting things about this research is that it was actually, a lot of the work was done by a master's student in our program at GW, along with myself, of course, and several professors at other universities in other fields like epidemiology and public health. So I want to take you back to July of 2020. And I suspect a lot of you remember what was happening in July of 2020. We were in the midst of a big worldwide crisis, the COVID pandemic. Okay. And so in that time frame, we had a lot of COVID cases all over the world. So this plot shows you the number of cases, and it shows you starting at the end of 2019 until the middle of July 2020. Cases were rising all over the world. These different colors are the different regions. And there were lots of problems associated with this. But one of the ways that countries and communities were trying to contain the spread of this virus was with testing. But we had a lot of problems doing testing. Okay, so here's a headline from the United States back in that time frame in summer 2020. Testing bottlenecks threaten New York City's ability to contain the virus. Right. So what they're saying is, if we can't test, then we can't figure out who has it, and we can't go and trace their contacts and ask all of them to quarantine, and they're out there spreading the virus. So this headline has this subheading: honestly, I don't even really see the point in getting tested. Right. So if it takes me 2 weeks to get my results back, why should I even bother? We had lots more headlines like this: testing bottlenecks keep states from tamping down virus. And so at the time, we were inspired by this to try to figure out, what could we do to help? How could we help to expand testing capacity? So the key questions that we were trying to answer in this project were, why is testing so slow, right? Why is it taking so long for people to get their results back when they go to get tested for COVID? And a more technical way of asking that question is, what are the bottlenecks in the process? A bottleneck is a part of the process that slows everything down. And so if we can figure out what are those slow places in the process, we can understand why that testing process is so slow. The second question is what can we do about that? How can we scale up capacity so that we can test more people and then, basically contribute to containing the spread of COVID-19? And at the same time, we don't just want to scale up, we want to make sure that our testing system is resilient to changes. So if suddenly a lot of people want to get tested, we want to make sure that our testing system can handle that. Okay. So why is testing so slow, and how can we scale up capacity? So to do this work, we're cooperating with a laboratory in a nearby state, the state of Maryland, that had sort of retrofitted some university-based capacity to be able to do COVID testing. They were using it for some research purposes. They realized it could be used for COVID testing, and they partnered with the government to do that. And so we worked with the leaders of this laboratory to study how their lab was working and to figure out where the bottlenecks were and what we could do to expand their testing capacity. So there were 4 steps in this project. First, we needed to understand the testing process. What happens? What are the steps? What do people do? What do machines do? So we wanted to kind of talk to people to understand that process, and also where were the challenges. The second step was to build a simulation model. In this case, we used a discrete event simulation model. I'll say more about that in a bit, to represent all the steps in that process. And now, once we had that simulation, basically a virtual environment, as we saw in the poll, then we can experiment in that virtual environment. We can try to figure out, what are the steps that are slowing down the process, and what changes can we make? How can we move people around? How can we add a machine or change what a machine is doing to alleviate those bottlenecks and to make that process flow more smoothly and enable more samples to be tested? So we did these experiments and we learned some things that I'll show you. And then we translated the results to practice by sharing them with the stakeholders, with the directors of the laboratory, with the people who worked in the laboratory. And we talked with them about ways to implement those findings to improve the capacity of the laboratory. So starting with the first step, first, I want to show you where that testing process fits, where the laboratory fits in the larger system. So this is our laboratory, and this is the part we're going to focus on. But before these COVID testing samples get to the laboratory, they have to be collected. And they're collected at lots of different places. They're collected at large public sites where anyone can go to get tested. They're also collected at universities. Universities are testing their own students. They're collected at clinics. They're collected at nursing homes where older people live with help. They're collected in all these different places. And these samples are in these tubes, and they're shipped to the laboratory. The laboratory tests them, and then those results are delivered sort of either on paper or electronically to the people who need them, either to a doctor to share with a patient, to a university to share with a student, et cetera. And then actions can be taken, right? People can be asked to quarantine, patients can be treated, the public health officials can figure out how badly the disease is spreading in a particular area. But we're going to focus on this testing process right here in the laboratory. So what does that look like? So we talked to the people who run this laboratory, and we visited the lab, and we were able to come up with this process diagram. So the first thing that happens, of course, is that those samples are collected. Usually there's a swab that is used to collect a sample, and then the swab is put in a test tube with some kind of collection medium in the bottom, and then it's capped and shipped to the laboratory. The next step is for that sample to be accessioned, which means basically to enter the information about the sample, like the patient's name, into a record system. Then the samples are put in these racks, and a person has to uncap each tube and take the swab out of the tube and throw it away. And then they put those samples on a rack like this. It's a little hard to see. And then this machine here transfers the liquid from these sample containers into a different kind of plate. That plate is put into a different machine in which they extract RNA from that sample. Then it goes to the PCR. I'm sure you've heard this term if you were paying attention to COVID testing. It goes to another machine that performs PCR and tells you whether that sample was COVID or not COVID. And then the results are kind of reported to a technician who approves them, and then they're delivered to whoever needs to see them. So this is the general process that's followed in the laboratory. We also asked the lab folks what are some challenges that they're facing. So one of the challenges is how demand for testing, like how many samples they get per week, goes up and down over time. So this line here shows you the weekly average number of samples that the lab was testing. So here it kind of fluctuates between 25,000 and 30,000, except right here. This is the week before the Christmas holidays. And lots of people in the US wanted to go and visit their relatives, and they wanted to know first if they had COVID. So there was a huge surge in the demand for testing in this week before Christmas. And so the laboratory wanted to figure out how could they handle these kinds of surges. Okay. To elaborate on that challenge a little bit, the previous graph showed how many tests they ran. This one shows how fast the results came back. How many hours went by from when those samples arrived at the laboratory until when the results were given back to the people who needed them, okay? And we wanted to keep that under 24 hours, one full day. And you can see that most of the time, most of the samples, most of the time those samples did get back before 24 hours, but especially in that last week when there was so much demand, a lot of samples did not get returned within 24 hours, and some took a very long time, okay? All right, so now we understand that process. Now we want to figure out how can we model it? How can we represent that process in a simulation model? And the advantage of a simulation model, as I said before, is that we can test changes to the system without actually buying new equipment or moving people around in a process that's so critical to public health. Okay, so we built this discrete event simulation model that basically represents every single sample that arrives in the laboratory and every step that that sample goes through along the way. And it basically says, okay, if there's a person available to do, let's say, that deswabbing step to take the swab out, then the sample will go through it. But if that person is busy doing other samples, it's going to have to wait. And there will be a long queue building up if that process is always busy. So with this model, we can identify those places where these long queues build up, and we can see how many samples we can get through the process in a given period of time. So with this model, we tested a lot of what if scenarios. We said, what if we add more technicians or we ask them to work longer shifts? What if we buy more equipment? What if we train people to do something faster than they're currently doing it? And we can see which of these what if scenarios, which of these management solutions will actually improve the performance of the laboratory. So I won't bore you with a lot of details, but we went to the laboratory and we did some measurements to see how long different process steps take. We saw how many people and how many machines were available to do each of those processes. So for example, that deswabbing, a step that I mentioned, it took between 3 and 30 seconds per sample. Because there were different kinds of swabs that were easier or harder to pull out of the tubes. And they had 2 technicians available to do that step. And to measure the performance of a system, we always define key performance indicators. What are the most important things that we want to know to be able to tell if our system is performing well? So in this case, there were 3. The first is the total number of tests we can conduct in a week. That's the capacity of the lab. So if we can improve that total number of tests, that means we're able to test more samples and we can get more people through the system. The second key performance indicator is the turnaround time. So how long does it take from when the sample arrives at the lab until the result is ready? Okay, and we wanted to keep that to less than 24 hours, one full day. The third one is more of an internal measure for us to figure out what's wrong with our process. And that's the percent utilization of resources, like people who work there. Okay, so if a technician is busy 50% of the time, that means that they often have the availability to process another sample. But if a person is busy 100% of the time, that probably means there's a queue building up waiting for them, that they always have something to do. Okay, and that means that they might be a bottleneck in the system. They might be slowing it down because they are always, always busy. Okay, so now that we have this model and we have our performance indicators, now we can do some experiments. We can try to find those bottlenecks and experiment with those process changes. These adding technicians or moving equipment around to get rid of those bottlenecks. So the first thing we looked at is the capacity of the lab. Okay, so this plot here shows you how many tests could be conducted per week. So how many samples could be tested per week at different levels of demand. So this is when you have about 27,000 samples arriving. And this was pretty average for this laboratory. This is when you have maybe 54,000 samples arriving every week. That was a very busy week for the lab. And here's if you have a really extraordinarily high number of samples arriving per week. The lab never saw this level. And we found that the laboratory could easily do all those, 27,000 samples per week. But when you had more, they could only do 33,000. When the demand is greater than 33,000, they can't test more than that. And the turnaround time goes above 24 hours. So this is useful to know. Our lab has a capacity of 33,000 samples per week. But what if we need to do more than that? What if more arrive? Then we're going to be slow. So we asked the question, why is testing so slow? And what that, a more technical way to ask that question again is, where are the bottlenecks? Which process step of all those steps is slowing things down? So to figure that out, we plot the percent utilization. Remember, this means how often is each step busy, okay? And these different colored bars are the different steps. Racking the samples, uncapping, deswabbing, extracting RNA, etc. Okay. And so we can see that this blue bar, when we have that low demand case, this blue bar is around 80%. It's busy, but it's not completely busy. And so we have plenty of capacity to do that number of samples. But here at 54,000, now suddenly this blue bar is at 100%. That means it cannot work any faster. It cannot do any more samples. And so it's very clear that this step is the bottleneck in the process. Okay. And that step is deswabbing, which I've talked about before. So this is the clear bottleneck. Now that we've identified this problem, we know why testing is so slow, because deswabbing is at capacity. We can't do any more of it. So we ask, how can we scale up capacity? It's going to have something to do with that deswabbing step, right? So we looked at a number of ways to sort of fix the problem with deswabbing. The first thing we looked at is, what if we could speed it up? What if we could train people somehow to do it faster? But that didn't help very much. So this plot shows what is the lab's capacity? How many samples per week can we get through? Okay, so in the baseline, remember, it's about 33,000. If we were able to speed up deswabbing, goes up to maybe a little over 40,000. Then we said, we worked with the stakeholders in the lab, and they said, well, it might be possible to ask some of the sample collectors to throw away the swab, not to leave the swab in the tube, okay? And so the reason the swab is left in the tube is because it's dangerous to throw away a swab that has a live, dangerous virus on it, okay? You either have to have a biohazard trash system, which many places, only hospitals have that. A university or a public testing site doesn't have that. Or you can make the little liquid in the bottom of the tube kill the virus so that it's safe to throw that swab in a regular trash can. And they said, well, we can't do that for every single place that collects samples, but maybe we could do it for half of them. So if half of those samples don't need to be deswabbed, now we have a much better capacity. We can get through about 65,000 samples in a week as opposed to 33. If we could do even more, if 2/3 of our sites can get rid of those swabs, we can do even better. We can do 75,000. Okay. And so this, our model was able to show the laboratory that this would be a very impactful change and worth working with the sample collection sites to be able to do that. And so the laboratory was able to implement this kind of change and really incredibly improve the capacity of the lab. We did ask some additional questions. We said, well, how much can we handle? And we assumed that, demand kind of looked like historical demand, but what if all of a sudden everybody came to do their sample collection on Friday, right before the weekend? Or, what if the demand went way up and down all the time? We said, how much of that surge can we handle? So this plot shows that turnaround time, right? Remember, we want to keep that below 24 hours. The green shows what happens if our demand is similar to historical demand. It's fairly evenly spread throughout the week. And the blue shows what if almost everybody came on a Friday, for example. Okay. So if it's nice, if it's sort of like historical demand, then our capacity, as I said, was like 70,000 once we made that change with the deswabbing. We could get up to, almost 70,000 before we went over that 24-hour boundary. But if our demand has those spikes in it, we can only do less than 50,000. Once we get above 50,000, we suddenly are taking longer than 24 hours to return some of our samples. So it shows that examining your demand variability is really important for understanding the performance of your laboratory system. So the last question that we asked then is, okay, we've already sort of doubled the capacity. What if we need even more capacity? What if we really have more people who need testing? What kinds of changes should we invest in? So we did some more scenarios, okay? So here again, this is our capacity in samples per week. At the baseline level, when we started this project, it was about 33,000. By improving that deswabbing, we were able to, almost double to 63 or 65,000. What else could we do? So we tried repurposing an instrument from a less busy process to a more busy process. That helped just a little bit. We tried asking people to work longer shifts, go from 8 hours a day to 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day. Again, that helped a little, but not very much. We tried another strategy called multiplexing an assay, which kind of reduces the number of tests you need to run. But that also didn't really help very much. And so we went back to the stakeholders and we said, there's not a whole lot you can do without buying more equipment to improve your capacity any further. But what if you were willing to buy more equipment? What if you really had to expand that capacity? So we did some analysis to figure out, what's the minimum set of equipment and technicians that you would need to buy to meet different demand targets. So to go from, an ability to handle 44,000 samples per week to 88,000, you would have to buy, go from 10 to 19 PCR machines. You'd have to go from 3 to 6 deswabbing technicians. So we're able to show what's the required investment to meet a particular target capacity for a laboratory. So that's most of what I'm going to tell you today. So just to summarize some of the conclusions from this project, we found at this laboratory that you could really gain a lot of capacity with very limited investment. Just getting rid of, improving that deswabbing step by making sure that half of the samples that arrive don't have a swab in them could double the capacity of the laboratory. It is possible to increase the capacity beyond that, but you have to buy equipment. And this type of model helped the laboratory to figure out what kind of equipment they would need to buy. We also found that these turnaround times depend a lot on the specific arrangement of equipment in the laboratory and how variable that demand is. And then finally, more generally, this whole idea of modeling, simulation modeling, to examine a process like this is really valuable for figuring out how to improve testing. But at the time we did this work, we couldn't find anyone else who was doing this. And so we wanted to kind of show to the public health community the value of doing this kind of process modeling for improving their operations. So I'll stop there, and I think we're doing questions a little bit later. But thank you for listening. I was very excited to share this work with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Gralla. That was very insightful. We still have close to 316 or 317 students in the audience which are tuned in and listening to this session. I know we said we would take questions in the end, but because we have some time on hand, I'm going to take one question quickly, if that's okay. This is from Grizzly Ann. Hi. She wants to know, did you use ODE models for this study?
We used discrete event simulation models, and we used a software package called Simio, which is a commercial software package for doing discrete event simulation. There are a number of others. But the type of model is discrete event simulation in the sense that you're representing time tick by tick by tick by tick. You have a time step and things happen at that time step. You move to the next time step and a bunch of things happen at that time step. Not sure if that answers your question entirely, but that's the general idea for this model.
Thank you. And she also says that I would love to know more on the process behind the results of this simulation. So in case if there is a link or something you would like to share with the audience, Dr. Gralla, feel free to drop it in the chat window.
There is. There's a paper, an academic paper, and I will put a link to that in the chat as soon as I can find that. There's obviously a lot more to the modeling process that I did not share here. I wanted to focus on the
no
results,
problem. In case if Dr. Gralla is unable to find that, feel free to send it to me via email, and we will be happy to share it with the students via message or email at a later stage. Thank you so much. So with that, once again, thank you, Dr. Gralla. Please do stay around for the questions. I am now going to very quickly run a second poll question for this evening before I invite Erin to come in and speak a little bit more about GWCs. Very quickly putting the second poll question, which is on the screen for all 307, 8 of you in the audience room. Here's a quick poll question on your screen. How many of you have applied for the George Washington Engineering Scholarship available for their various master's programs provided through the $1.9 million Seed Scholarship Fund? Your answers are on the screen. Yes, you've already applied and are keeping your fingers crossed, in which case Erin can definitely help you. Not yet, because you've been procrastinating, in which case I would say, come on, guys, let's apply for this scholarship. Or are you someone who's applying for a later intake? So this scholarship is for those applying for the fall 2024 intake. In case if you're someone who's applying for later than that, and also those who don't know a lot about the scholarship and want to know a little bit more about the scholarships, the programs, etc. at GWCs. So the questions are on the screen in front of you. Have you applied for the scholarship? To all 310 of you and counting, please go and cast your votes. I will keep this poll running for a little bit longer. Let us know if you want to know more, which will help you apply to these scholarships, help you make the right choice about the programs in the universities. Are you someone who's already applied, have your fingers crossed and really want that scholarship? Or for whatever reason, you've been unable to do so, in which case I would say, please go ahead because deadlines are approaching soon. I will be dropping a link for this in the chat window as well. With this, I will end my poll very, very shortly in the next 1 second. Okay, done. I'm going to share the results for you. So this 24% of you who have already applied, all the best to you guys. We will keep you posted. Please keep checking our Instagram pages, etc. We will let you know. For those who haven't, I'm going to drop the link in the chat window. Please go and apply. All those who are applying for later intakes, please stick around. You can learn a lot more. And for the 39 of you who want to know more, not just about the scholarship, but about GWCs as well, I now invite Erin to please come up and take us away with her presentation.
Thank you so much. Let me get my screen shared here. 1 second. Okay, how does it look? Okay.
Yes, you're good to go.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today, and we just love hosting these kind of events because not only does it give you a little bit of insight into a very specific area of research that we're working on, but it just gives you an idea of what it's like to be a graduate student in the US, a graduate student at GW. This is the kind of work our students are doing every day. Excuse me. And it's really interesting and it's really applicable to daily life. So we're glad to be here today and able to show you just a glimpse of that work. So I'm here today just to talk to you very briefly about GW, about our engineering school and programs, and what kind of resources we have for our graduate students. At the end of the session, I'll keep my part really short. And then at the end of the session, I'm happy to take any questions that you have about applying to graduate school or one of our programs. And I know Dr. Gralla is also happy to take any further questions that you have about her subject area as well. So here's just a bit of information about GW. We're a large urban university. We're located right in downtown Washington, D.C., the capital of the U.S. It's a very vibrant city. It's very international, intercultural. It's a lot of fun for our graduate students. Our university has over 2,500 full-time faculty and over 25,000 students. And one thing that's a bit unique about GW is that over 15,000 of our students are graduate students. So this means there are a lot of students for you to get to know, for you to network with. Also, there's just a lot of resources geared towards graduate level education at our school. Across the university, we have 172 million plus in research funding, and we'll talk a little bit more about research within the School of Engineering as well. So we have 14 schools and colleges with graduate programs across GW, ours being the School of Engineering and Applied Science. Within the School of Engineering and Applied Science, we have 6 academic departments, one of which, of course, is Engineering Management and Systems Engineering, where Dr. Gralla works, and 11 fields of study. I'll show you a quick glimpse of what programs we have at the MS level and at the PhD level, in case you're interested in PhD at this point or in the future. We have over 90 tenured and tenure track faculty members just in the School of Engineering, just working with our engineering and computer science students, and then 22 million in research spending. So, and I believe this is going up again this year. So this number is calculated based on last year. This is great. This really speaks to the level of funding we have for equipment, for research that we're running, for all the opportunities that trickle down to our students in our graduate programs. And this is our science and engineering hall. So I'll just show this to you briefly, but this is the hub for our students, for our faculty. A lot of our research is actually going on inside the walls of this building. We have a high bay with strong wall and strong floor. We have high resolution imaging suites. We have a lot of different laboratories. We have classrooms, study rooms, administrative offices, academic departments, everything kind of located in this building, which is actually one of the largest teaching facilities in the city of Washington, D.C. So this is a hub for our graduate students, and we do offer a virtual tour on our website. Just take a minute, jump on the website, which I'll provide at the end of the talk, and you can virtually walk through the building and see what it's like to walk through the halls and see our classrooms and labs on a daily basis. So as I mentioned, I want to show just a list of the programs that are available in our School of Engineering. The MS programs are on your screen now. Of course, today we're talking about engineering management and systems engineering. We also have our data analytics program, which is quite popular, which is a joint program in the School of in the Department of Engineering Management and Systems Engineering and Computer Science. And then the other subjects listed here as well. At the PhD level, we have the same subject areas, but we have 8 primary degree programs that are offered. And of course, a lot of focus on different research, on different subject areas within these degree programs. PhD, of course, are a little more self-directed, where you're working on your own research interests and supporting the research of the faculty member that you'll be working with. Scholarships and funding opportunities, I just want to mention briefly because we do tend to get a lot of questions on this subject area. And I do see that a lot of you are interested in learning more about scholarships that we have available and that we partner with SEED to make available to you. At the master's level, our merit-based scholarships range from 25 to 75% of the tuition cost. While there's no separate application for our general scholarship pool, there is an application process to apply for the SEED scholarship program. So please ask questions of our host, reach out to the SEED team, and talk to them about applying for that SEED scholarship program to get you that extra consideration when we're reviewing our scholarship pool for the year. We're currently reviewing applications. We're currently issuing scholarships right now for fall 2024 students. If you're still interested in applying for that semester, be sure to reach out to my team. And of course, we're taking applications for following semesters as well. At the doctoral level, if you're interested in applying for a PhD program, typically if you're admitted to the PhD program, you are offered a funding package as well. It's not a guarantee, but that's the result for, I would say, at least 80 to 90% of our PhD applicants, which will cover the tuition cost of your program as well as a monthly stipend for living expenses. So that's our typical funding structure at the PhD level. Now, I'm just going to mention a few quick resources for our graduate students, and then I'm going to close out and turn it back over for a Q&A, and you can let us know what else you would like us to address while we're here with you this morning, this evening, this afternoon, depending on where you're located. Career Services Center. So a lot of the questions that we get from prospective students are around the type of employment opportunities you might find after graduation, the type of support the university offers for this. So we're very happy to have our W. Scott Amy Career Services Center in the School of Engineering and Applied Science. We're fortunate that this is a center dedicated just to our engineering and applied science students. They offer support throughout your program from day one. So creating a LinkedIn profile, a resume, a CV, cover letters, networking opportunities with alumni, with industrial leaders. We offer interview days, we offer job fairs, all sorts of resources that are available to our students to help them prepare for that transition when their graduate program's over and they want to move into their desired career field. We also work with a significant number of international students at GW, and so we're very well versed in helping students who are interested in pursuing CPT or OPT. These are work permissions for students who want to stay up to a few years in the US after their degree program. So our advisors we're very well versed in helping you find the right type of opportunities for that and helping you navigate through that application process, if that's something that you're interested in. The GW Engineering Advantage and the DC Advantage. So we are fortunate that we have highly specialized departments and we have small to medium class sizes throughout our school, which allows students to have a lot of interactions with their faculty members, to get a lot of hands-on experience in the field that they're studying. We have connections with industry leaders and employers where students do internships, where they go for research projects, where they get hired coming out of their program. And you can see just some examples of that on the screen. And finally, especially when we're here today talking about the topic of engineering management and systems engineering, our EMSC department is a shining example of our engineering and philosophy. So we don't believe that engineering exists in its own vacuum, but our focus is heavily on interdisciplinary research, interdepartmental projects and research. You'll see work, for example, in EMSC that they're doing with public health and other areas, sometimes with law, with public policy. We have collaborations between electrical engineering with biomedical engineering, and so forth. So this is really our philosophy across the school, is that we can create better solutions when we work together across programs, across departments, and we find that really benefits our students as well. Just a quick mention for a few of our current graduate students here at GW Engineering. We have Srinivas, Iyad, and Tamima, and they are current students in our MS or PhD programs. And they and other students are available to answer questions. If you have a question about what it's like to be a current student in our program studying in the US, please feel free to reach out. I list our website here on the slide, but this is accessible from our main GW Engineering webpage. And you have the opportunity to just direct chat them your questions and learn a little bit more about their student experience. Okay, that's it for me. I will turn it back over for other questions that the audience might have for us. I'll just mention on the screen, I've posted a application fee waiver. So if you're still interested in applying for fall 24, or you're looking for spring 25, which for us is January 2025, application cycle, please feel free to use this fee waiver. We're happy to provide this to participants with us today. Our website's on the screen, and the email address of myself and my team, engineering@gwu.edu. This is where we can answer all your questions about our programs and the application process, and just how to maximize your opportunities with us. So that's all from me. Thank you so much, and happy to take any questions that I can help with.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erin. That was very, very helpful. I see there are quite a few questions, as always, about the application fee waivers. So what I'm going to do very quickly is, to all of you who are excited about this application fee waiver for your applications, you can use the code. I am also putting this in the chat window. So great. If you can check the chat window, I have posted the link to the Seed Scholarship Fund for GWCs along with the application fee waiver for this masterclass for all those who wish to apply to any of the master's program at GWCs. So thank you very much, all of you. Quite a bit of questions. I am going to start taking these. So yes, we've already answered the one about application fee waivers. It's there in the chat window. Erin has shared it. You can go ahead and take that one. So Erin, I will start by taking this first question for you, which is from Bright, who wants to know so basically they have a diploma and they want to know, is it possible for them to secure an admission into any of the master's program at GWCs with a diploma, or what is the way that they can go about it?
Thank you for asking this question. We get this question a lot recently. Unfortunately, we don't accept higher national diplomas for direct admission into our master's program. If you do have a higher national diploma, it would need to be combined with another bachelor's degree equivalent to a 4-year US degree. If you have further questions about that, please feel free to email my team, engineering@gwu.edu. We do get a lot of questions about this and are happy to help. I will say that please ask any universities that you're interested in potentially applying for about this question. You will find some differences with universities across the US in terms of what their background requirements are, what their testing requirements are, et cetera. So I think that's always worth mentioning. These are questions you need to ask to every university that you're considering.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erin. I'm going to follow that up with another question. I'm going to sort of take these questions and put them together. One is, of course, about the application process. We always get these questions around the application process in terms of what are the documents which are required for my application process. Can you tell us a little bit about the transcripts which are required? And does GWCs require a GRE for the exams? If yes, then what is the number? If not, then what is the process? So breaking it down again for you, it's mostly about the documents, transcripts, GRE. So 3 major concerns which are on every student's mind.
Yes, most of what I do all day is answer these questions for our prospective students and applicants. So I'm happy to help answer this. In general, for our MS program, our application requirements are transcripts, which I'll get back to in a minute, English proficiency scores. These are waived for certain countries. I'll say, just based on the audience today, India, it's not waived. And I saw Nigeria and Ghana, the English requirement is waived. So just to clarify those things, there's a list of countries with waivers on our website. Recommendation letters, we require 2 for MS applicants. These can be professional or academic. So a lot of people say, well, I'm not still in contact with my faculty. If that's the case and you're in professional work, they can write your recommendations as well, and your resume and your statement of purpose. So that just tells us about your background what you've been up to, and your statement of purpose helps us understand your motivation for applying to our programs. Transcripts are a bit tricky because we get so many applications from students around the world and the requirements vary from country to country. But I'll say generally for admission purposes, we take unofficial transcript copies. We will eventually require official transcripts when you enroll, but for admission review, we take unofficial copies. We don't need a WES evaluation or anything, but again, you should verify that with every university that you're interested in. Some will require a WES evaluation, we do not. And then if you're in India, we require individual semester mark sheets. So that's a common question that we get is what is required. So we're looking for your degree certificate if you've finished. We're looking for your individual semester mark sheets to evaluate your application. Does that take care of the document question?
Yes, I think it does. Yeah. Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Sure.
much for taking that one. The next one. Okay, I'm going to take this one up myself. There is a question from Divyam, who thinks since the university is located in Washington, D.C. is the primary focus on law. Divyam, there's so many universities in Washington, D.C. offering all different kind of programs, and GWCs has some of the best engineering programs for you. Go on their website, check it out, and yes, there is a lot of options and opportunities out there. Great, thank you so much. The next question I would like to take would be for Dr. Grala. There are people here who want to know, so I'm going to rephrase this question a little bit. People want to know, for someone who wants to study simulation modeling as one of the components in their master's degree, what should ideally be their undergraduate background? So one, of course, the undergraduate background, and which of the master's programs available at GWCs would be the right program for someone who's looking to go deep, take a deep dive into simulation modeling?
Great. I love to hear that people are interested in simulation modeling. So in terms of your degree that you want to have before joining our program, an operations research degree, an industrial engineering degree, and are like very applicable, but you can also, any mathematical background, any engineering background is appropriate for joining our master's program and learning about simulation and the other aspects that you would learn in our program. We do also sometimes have applicants who don't have a math or engineering background, but have something else very relevant. Perhaps they did public health, so in this case, or perhaps they did another kind of science-oriented degree, and that can also translate very well to simulation. So it's a very broadly accepting kind of program. And then in terms of what you would do at GW, so our department offers 2 degrees that both include aspects of simulation modeling. One of them is engineering management, and this focuses more on the management aspects, the people, the organizations. And then the second is systems engineering, which focuses more on the sort of technical design and putting systems together. But simulation modeling is very relevant, and it's kind of common to both programs.
Great, thank you. A follow-up question from someone else around the same thing is, to apply for any of these programs, should you have any prior research background before you apply to them?
I guess I can take that. For our master's program, we do not expect any kind of research background. If you have it, wonderful. We're very excited, but that is not at all expected. But you are still welcome to kind of explore research opportunities once you arrive at GW.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Grala. The next one I'm going to take for you, Erin. This question is, are there any dual or combined master's and PhD engineering programs available at GWCs?
That's a great question. The way it works at our university is that you do need to apply and enter the programs separately. So if you're coming from a bachelor's program, for example, you would likely apply first to a master's program. You would spend 2 years studying at the master's level. While you're at our university, you can apply to continue at the PhD level and would need to be accepted and readmitted as a PhD student. There can be overlap. So there can be overlap in your department, the research that you're doing. You can get started in the master's program. You can do a master's thesis. You can love it so much that you want to continue as a PhD student. But we don't take initial applications to take students the whole way through both programs and award both degrees, if that makes sense.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Erin. I hope that answers your question. The next question I would take, Dr. Grala, this one would be for you. Samuel wants to know, how can simulation modeling be used to build resilient infrastructure for food security?
That's a great
Wow.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can simulation modeling be used to build resilient infrastructure for food security? So simulation modeling is really excellent for asking these kinds of what if questions, right? I have a system, I want to represent it, and I want to ask, what if I changed this thing? How would that change the outcomes? What if I didn't change anything, but the world changed in some way? And how would that affect the outcomes that I see? And so you could use that for all kinds of resilience questions, as I did in the talk I talked about today. You could talk about food security. Food security can mean a lot of things. So if we're talking about like making sure that our supply chains are safe from tampering and contamination, we could look at it to understand where are the weak points in a supply chain. If we're talking about it in the sense of like, I'm secure in that I have access to food, I also did some work on that, where we kind of used the principles behind simulation modeling to understand what are the dangers, like where would people lose access to food from their supply chains, under what circumstances. So there's lots of really interesting ways to use very many different kinds of simulation models to study things on short time scales like I did, or on very long time scales, like years or decades.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Grala. The next one, Erin, I'll take for you. This is from Abdullah, but I'm going to generalize it more to a broader audience. What he wants to know if someone who has no work experience, the CGPA or their grades during their undergrad have not been, let's say, up to the mark, is it a good idea for them to apply for a master's program? To kind of add on to this question, which is something which is always on students' mind, and you will also agree with me, is that what is it that students can do in this case to make sure that they have a stronger profile when they're looking at applications in case of having less CGPA or grades, at the same time having no work experience? So what would be your advice for someone like that?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And I would say there's maybe a couple of different pieces of advice I would give. One advice would be to consider continuing your education locally. So if there's a local school or university where you could just take a couple additional courses in your area of interest, that might help you ensure that your knowledge is very up to date. And then if you perform well in those courses, of course, help prepare you for further study at the graduate level. Get the work experience. So depending on what you're doing at the moment, get the work experience, get an internship. Work experience doesn't have to be full-time paid permanent employment. There are a lot of opportunities to jump in and participate in internships and volunteer organizations, research projects, and so forth. Let's see what else. The other thing I'll just mention is that our application review is a holistic review process. So the CGPA, while it's really important, is not the only thing we're looking at in the application process. So if a student, for example, has an average, an okay GPA, but it doesn't make them stand out, we'll look at other things in the application process. So maybe they have really, really excellent recommenders that talk about how exactly this student has performed really well and will be a great asset to our university. Maybe the student themselves describes in their statement of purpose why exactly they're trying to pursue this degree program, and maybe why they've struggled in the past, but how they got on track and now they feel like they're ready for graduate education. So we're considering all of those factors. We're reading every piece of every application, which is why sometimes it takes a little longer than students hope to get a decision. We're reading it very thoroughly, and we're really evaluating not only the student's academic background and profile, but all these other aspects of the application. The other thing I'll mention that I forgot to address previously was GRE scores. So we currently do require GREs at the PhD level. We do not require them at the MS level. However, if you've taken the GRE and you feel like it's a really good reflection of your ability, you can submit it with an MS application. And that's just another aspect that will help us further evaluate your sort of academic ability to succeed in our programs. So that's the advice I would give.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erin. I'm sure that's helpful to all of you in the audience and for a couple of you who've asked various different kinds of questions. My next question will be for Dr. Grala. I am a bit conscious of the time, so I'm going to take a few more before we end the session for today. This one is from Akshay Joshi, who wants to know where all can simulation be used across industries? And what are the career options available to students in this discipline?
That's a great question. So let me speak about simulation first. So simulation, amazingly, is useful across many, many, many kinds of industries. I gave you an example today from public health. It's also useful in, well, we talked about food security. It's useful in supply chain management. It's useful in manufacturing, all kinds of industrial applications. It's useful anywhere that there's a process that can be sort of optimized or improved. But it's also, there are many other kinds of simulation modeling that are useful in many more fields. So it's useful in economics, in predicting the impact of different kinds of energy. You know, the transition from fossil fuels to green energy relies on lots of simulation. So there are many, many aspects, many industries that rely on simulation. In terms of careers, you as someone with expertise in simulation, you could label yourself in a few different ways: a systems engineer, an engineering manager, an operations analyst, and then depending on your sort of the industry you want to study, right? You could be an energy expert, a public health expert. So there are lots of paths open to people with a simulation background. I will just add that simulation is not the only thing we do in engineering management, right? There's a lot of other aspects. We talk about project management, we talk about financial planning, we talk about many different things in our program. And the same kind of advice or the same answer goes for all of those. We are a program that give you a set of skills. Simulation is one of them that are useful in a lot of different industries. We kind of make you a very good manager and modeler that can be applied in lots of different places.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Grala. We all know now about the different ways in which you can do it. What are the career options which are available? I'm going to take my last question for this evening for Erin. Erin, here's another very big question which lies on a lot of students' mind. And Pratul has asked this, saying, will a gap year hinder one's chances of getting an admission into a master's program?
No. If you can justify it. No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't hinder. I mean, gap years can be so valuable. Anything that you could ask, will blank hinder my chances of getting into a graduate program? I mean, the answer is just have a good explanation for it. So why did you take a gap year? What have you been doing? How has this helped you? How has this time helped you figure out what you want to do next in life? That's exactly the point of a gap year. So just talk about it in your statement of purpose. You know, we're not going through everyone's application and being like, wow, for 4 months in 2017, they didn't seem to do anything. You know, that's not our biggest priority. We just want to understand, you know, overall a student's background and their motivation and where they're at today. So I think a gap year, like anything else, some students have a bad semester and you have some bad marks, and that's okay. Just explain it. Tell us what happened. Talk about it in your statement of purpose, that you had this hurdle and here's how you overcame it. You took this gap year. Here's, you know, how that helped you, and here's what you learned from that gap year. We read your statements very carefully, and it helps us understand who you are, and hopefully that you'd be a great fit for our programs.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erin. With that, I am going to end the Q&A. I know there are quite a few questions which are still there in the Q&A window, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. For everyone who still has their questions, a lot of them I noticed are still related to profiles, programs, etc. at GWCs. Request you to kindly get in touch with the team. To all 210 of you in the room, thank you so much for staying with us. Erin has dropped their email ID in the chat window. Please feel free to connect with them. Thank you all for being such lovely participants and for this to be a very engaging session. Some of you did put in the chat window that they have enjoyed the session thoroughly. We are happy to bring you such sessions and we'll keep bringing you many more in the future. To my fellow panelist, Dr. Prala, thank you so much for a very, very insightful session and helping us understand how simulation modeling can be used. And yes, so thank you very much for that. Erin, thank you so much once again for walking us through all of the programs and the opportunities available at GWCs. Very good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and have a nice, great day, everyone, from us here at SEA. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, everyone.